Hello, Internet. Here again tonight to make another video. I guess I'll have to talk up a little bit, so I don't use an exterior microphone. But today I was thinking a little bit about where a lot of the cultural influences come from, where the quote-unquote manosphere has come into being and influence nowadays, and a lot of them come from they're exploiting a real phenomenon, but they're coming from a group of people who have so much money and resources that they apparently don't have anything else to think about other than apparently population collapse. And in the specific case, like, that's Elon Musk's thing, and he's super creep. He's trying to rebuild the population on his own in a way that will result in his great-grandchildren committing incest or something like that. But yeah, it's coming from a class of people who have so much time and money that they can think about crazy eugenics problems like population collapse. And it's a cool tie-dye shirt my wife made for me a couple of years ago on our family camping trip. All the kids were making them. They did some amazing ones this year, but yeah. So you got your Peter Thiels, your Elon Musks, Trump, JD Vance, all these guys who are unbelievably wealthy, and in positions of power that we don't have. You and I don't have that, and unless something insane happens, like out of a comic book, we're never going to have that position or that influence. And these guys apparently have enough time and money to sit around and think up crazy ideas that are oftentimes rooted in like classic American and Western European racist ideas. Like, so how does this relate to feminism? Well, a few things. There's a few ideas that all create kind of a nexus of bad ideas all together at one time. And one of those, let's start with the big bad. The notion of an alpha male, the idea of a man being innately born with qualities that make him a leader and respected and attractive. Like, if you don't know because you're a guy and you don't get into feminist literature or follow, what people are actually talking about on the subject from a sociology and psychology standpoint, this whole concept is based on a false premise. The idea that wolves have alphas and betas, and it all comes from a guy who went out and watched wolves in the wild and thought he was seeing something and then wrote a book, and it's been debunked. It's not true. And you might say, well, it might not be true scientifically for wolves, but humans clearly have blah, 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 blah. I get where you're coming from, but you've got to have data to support some of these things. And just because it's easy, let's go for a biblical example. There's a prominent example in the Old Testament of the Hebrew Bible where Israel wants a king. And they tell God, we want a king. And God's prophet goes to God, and God's like, you know what? They're not rejecting you. They're rejecting me. They want something better than me, the God of the universe who's provided for them. So he says, okay, I'll give them a king. And he gives them exactly what you're looking for in a king, Saul. Saul has all the qualities of what, might be coined or termed today an alpha. Right? He's tall, he's attractive, he's assertive, he's all of these things. And Saul goes on to make a big old mess of it. And God withdraws his anointing from Saul and bestows it upon David, who is none, at least he's attractive apparently, but none of the things that Saul is. And okay, that's not a scientific example, but at least from my perspective as a Christian, that tells me that what you think is what is good is definitely not always good, but also that these notions of what is the prime, the best, whatever, can easily be overturned, not only intellectually, but in the case of the modern world, scientifically. There's no such thing as an alpha. There are people who are conditioned to be a certain way, and they may end up that way and they may not, but they're not born that way. They're not gifted. I was in basic training with a guy, probably should have been, by the standards of what an alpha might be, probably should have been the one in charge of our flight in basic training. He was a backup quarterback to the University of Missouri. He was in peak physical condition. He was not unintelligent, but he also wasn't particularly sharp. But he was also not a leader. So, he's out. He's not an alpha. He hit you when you met him because he was a peak physical specimen. But from there, it just kind of went, downhill a little bit. Nice guy, like him, not putting him down at all. Just saying, if you're looking for your alpha, he's not it. And so we've got that one. This idea that there's such a thing as an alpha. There's not. It's not ingrained in the natural world. And then another one are these concepts that are interwoven nebulously with pseudoscience that somehow, the Western world is being overrun by people who are not Western. And by not Western, let's be explicit, they mean non-white. When that is said, I grew up in a really coded society, one that had all sorts of ways to say things that were not acceptable in polite society and not the thing that became popular, especially under Trump, but even farther back, was that they weren't politically correct. Well, back then people actually tried. There were a lot of people who tried to be what we would call politically correct for the sake of the feelings of the people around them. And even though that doesn't make it better, at the very least, they weren't just, saying all the crap we hear nowadays. But what it meant was that it was a very coded society. Had a quick little break there so my daughter could pass through and so forth. But this coded society in which I grew up was deeply, if not explicitly all the time, quite racist. Now, no one wanted to think of themselves that way. It was the late 20th century. People were hoping that they had moved on and that we had moved on and everybody was moving on. The problem was nobody moved on. They just went underground, sort of. And you would hear people say things in ways that were meant not to give offense, and yet you were still saying the thing that was deeply offensive. That's kind of where we are a little bit, except it's triple layered here. So in defense of Western civilization, these individuals like Elon Musk and J.D. Vance, they think we need to have more babies, right? We need to have more babies and stronger families to defend Western civilization. Firstly, this is not new. The British did the same thing during the Victorian era. The British woman got raised up on this pillar as the paragon of all that was Western civilization. And they're doing it again. They're just doing it for Americans especially, and they say, look at what happened to Europe. They've been overrun by people who don't hold the same values. People who don't uphold the same values as you, whether it's true or not, you're definitely dog whistling hard. You're trying to say people not like us, and by not like us, we mean not white and ostensibly Christian. Although how Christian you are is not on the grading scale. So you've got all these components, and this particular one is that somehow our civilization needs defending, as if one civilization is superior to another. This is a constant argument as well, that one civilization is superior to another. This is utterly ridiculous. If you're an actual lover of history and the study of it across the globe, you will not find a civilization that does not have absolutely barbaric practices and admirable qualities. This is a human characteristic. So, any defense of Western civilization is unwarranted and ridiculous. Right. So you take that, you couple it with toxic masculinity, and you use this coded language that makes it sound like what's being done is noble, or the views being espoused are good for everybody, and they're not from a place of selfishness. All of these things are smokescreens and an excuse and a way for, well, greedy, malicious people to garner your support and your money. I mean, Elon Musk has been through several phases of public evolution. None of them have actually really been good, except for his possibly feigned environmentalism. I don't think it's really feigned. I think maybe he gets that you can't destroy the place you live in and carry on living there. But the place that they come from is similar to a place I come from. The place they come from is, by that I mean, it's just a place of privilege. I'm getting to sit here right now in a house that we own, that I love, in comfort, air conditioning, with all the food and stuff and extra stuff that I don't like. I have everything, and pontificate into a camera. So in that respect, I share that privilege with them. I'm not wealthy by their standard at all, and even by American standards, but by the standard of history, I am filthy rich. Like, this is something I try to reiterate in lessons I teach in church, is that by modern standards, we are all rich as white middle class people in America, in a way that was unfathomable even to, the upper middle class of the Middle Ages. There was not really an upper middle class, but the merchant class, we are quite wealthy, and there's no way around that. Some of it is perverted a little bit, though, like the way that there are more homeless people who have cars than homeless people who just have nowhere to be in some parts of America, like about 40 miles from here where I work. All of this to say that there are the people who want you to believe a certain thing, the people who are in power, the people who have a vested interest in you thinking a certain way, also have the time and energy to think about things that are not real problems, like population collapse. Now, there might be